There's been a massive anti-solar push coming from both sides of all things, and I think that the fact that this is happening should tell you that it's more than just what you're seeing in the main argument. So, let's get into it. Hi, I'm Zyfei, a Chimera VTuber who mostly focuses on game streaming, but every once in a while will be delving into tech or even finance. And solar has been a big interest of mine for a while, so when I saw what was going on, I really couldn't just let it go. So let's dive right in and see what they're saying about solar and what the reality is. Because we've got Florida and California both saying similar things and doing the same thing, which should tell you that there's something up with what they're doing right now. So, what are they saying? Well, the main argument is against net metering. According to them, net metering is nothing more than a subsidy for rich solar power owners where they will get paid the going rate for power on a one-to-one basis for the power they generate and put back into the grid. But they will also talk about at times how how you need to support new technology and subsidies make sense, but solar prices have come down, and so now average people can afford it, and so it doesn't need to be subsidized. Well, if you look, prices are only really within the reach of normal people with solar loans. Otherwise, it's still very much a rich person game. But even then, no, that's not how net metering works. That might be how it appears at a surface level, but that's not how it works. Because you see, while net metering allows for someone to be paid on a one-to-one basis for the going rate of electricity, it doesn't actually require it. Most solar owners are lucky to get between 40 and 50%, so half rate or less, and many times they just get a credit, which means if they need to use the grid for anything, the credit gets used before they actually have to pay out of pocket, except most power companies, in fact every power company I've looked up thus far, has still charged a monthly or annual hookup fee. So they're still getting money either way. So you're getting at best half cost of power, which means they're still making half of that cost as a power company. But it goes further than that, because you've just eliminated all the fuel that would be needed to be burnt in order to power your house. So that's 100% fuel reduction, assuming you're at the point where you are now selling power back to the grid. Except it's more than that, because something that's often not shown in the metrics or calculated is the amount of power it took to get that power to you. You see, the farther you have to go and across more resistance, the more power you have to generate in order to push that power across that distance. And most of the United States power grid is pretty old and poorly maintained. So power companies sometimes have to generate a lot more power in order to get that power to the house. So you look at your net power usage, and your house is probably still accounting for a larger carbon footprint than what it's actually said. Meaning that an overproducing solar house is negating more power than is actually on the number. And because the power that it's generating is going directly to the neighbors, it doesn't have very far to go, so it also provides a greater net benefit to the grid. That's a lot less fuel that needs to be burned in order to generate that power, and that's a lot less wear and tear on the grid itself, because it's that much less power going that much shorter distance. So you are actually going to see reduced utilities maintenance costs through overproduction of local solar on its own before you get to the point of paying into the system. So this net metering solar power owners are not pulling their own weight type argument is really, really just an excuse. And this can be magnified if solar owners are using batteries as well, which just allows them to overproduce even further and put power into the grid even at night. And there are many power companies that even say, hey, we want to be able to use your batteries, or will even require access to your batteries if you're going to be hooked up to the grid. So you're seeing actually a lot of net benefit from solar users than you are from just straight up, oh, I'm going to use the power company's power because I'm using the power company's power. It actually goes a little farther than that, because now we get to the results of what's going on with the elimination of net metering, which again, a lot of solar people aren't actually getting paid anyways. They're just getting credits for if they need to shut down for any reason. But you're also seeing a big push to charge solar people even more to remain hooked up to the grid. Basically an extra hookup tax, or a you're using solar not buying from us tax. And what that's going to do is it's going to drive solar people off of the grid. They're going to just say, okay, I'm going to get batteries and I'm going to disconnect from the grid. Because a lot of times, if you're not on the utility grid, they cannot try to impose restrictions on you. Because many places, like Duke, will not allow you to even have batteries on their grid at all as a deterrent to solar. Which again, as we just established with batteries, does nothing but harm the grid. Well, people are going to say, okay, if I just got panels, I didn't get a battery, but you're going to punish me for having panels and being hooked up, so I'm just going to disconnect and go buy the battery, even if it involves financing, because it will now cost me less per month to finance that extra amount than it will to pay your fees for a grid that I'm not even buying any power from. This will then increase wear and tear on the grid again, because the overproduction coming from the solar panels isn't going into the grid. No one is benefiting from it. The person just fills their batteries, uses them at night, and it's up and it's done. There is no longer any kind of reduction in load on the grid that would have otherwise occurred. So by doing this, all you're doing is actually eliminating a means to save costs through lower maintenance due to lower wear, and driving more and more people off the grid. And of course, the power company will then likely raise prices for real. Well, they're raising prices either way, in order to make up for the new losses. Because now you've got properties occupying the area that aren't paying anything. Because once you disconnect from the grid, they do not have an excuse to pay you, to charge you anymore. What is the real end game with all this? Because it seems like all they're doing is increasing their own costs while punishing solar users. Or trying to just scare people off of solar in general, which, yeah, of course that second one is part of it. But there's another part. You see, thanks to our carbon laws here in the US, a lot of power companies still have to buy from other green power companies. And the farther away those power companies are, the more they're going to charge to pump their power across the grid to wherever is being serviced. But these agreements have a built-in profit margin for the power company. Not the green production, but for the power company itself. It actually benefits them to have to pay more to buy from a solar farm or a wind farm or a hydro farm, because then they get to charge that much more and make that much more in profit, because it's a percentage based, not just a hard number. So they can use this as an excuse to raise their rates by saying, oh, we need to buy solar from 2 states over now. And they're gonna say, hey, we're paying this much more in order to cover our green costs. But what they're not saying is that they're making this much more thanks to the built-in profit margin. And this is really the primary driving factor. Power companies that are going to be benefiting from farther distance purchases, as well as, of course, power companies that just have agreements built in with the various fuel providers. If half their houses have switched to solar power, I know that's a high number, but let's say half their houses have switched to solar power, they're now burning that much less fuel in order to maintain that grid. That hurts their agreements with the fuel companies, who get mad and stop offering bulk deals because they're not buying as. And they can only overproduce so much power, so much waste, which on an annual basis is already something like 50,000 terawatt hours, because if you produce too much waste, you just crash your own power grid. So those are the main points for what is going on and why we're seeing multiple states pushing back against home solar use. What they're saying, why what they're saying is just a load of crap, and what the reality of the situation is. This is just meant to be a relatively fast breakdown, trying not to get too far into the weeds. I hope that this has given you a good place to at least start for looking into the situation, as well as an idea of what to do if you yourself are interested in solar. And please feel free to make any comments or ask any questions down below, and I'll try to get back to you. And thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video or stream. Have a good one.